Welcome back to On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel, and we've got a fun one today. CJ, this is your brainchild. You came to me with this, and I love it. So we're going to do it. We're going to do a comparison, 6 categories comparing the Texas football teams of 2023, 2024, and 2025. We're going to figure out which one of these is the best, which one you'd rather go to battle with, however you want to do this. But CJ, I think we got 6 categories that are really good. I haven't even asked you this, so we'll start here. What made you think of this exercise? What prompted it? I know it's the off season. We all go rabbit holing, as my man Rod Babers likes to say. Where'd you come up with this?
Well, I'm sitting here thinking as we're 6 practices into the spring, Jeff, saying, okay, how can this Texas program take that next step? You talk about the quarterback position. We've talked about the defensive end position. We've talked about where they might be really strong next year, thinking, okay, back-to-back Final Fours, back-to-back college football semifinals. How do you get over the hump? How do you make a national championship game? How do you win the national championship game? Does Texas have the horses in the stable on this roster? And where might they be better than what we've seen? And again, Texas has been pretty darn good over the last 2 years. But how can they get over that hump? We'll see, because I think this is going to be a really talented roster.
All right, so we've got 6 categories. We're going to look at quarterback. We're going to look at offensive skill, line of scrimmage, which obviously is the O-line and predominantly the interior D-line. And what about edge? Well, we'll get to that next because we're going to get pass defense, which is pass rush combined with secondary play. Which defense do we think is better? Special teams and coaching. Which version of this staff is going to be the better version? So we'll get to that. CJ, let's start with quarterback. And I thought my initial reaction when I started thinking about this was, all right, 2024 is out because I don't think the 2024 version of Quinn Ewers was the best version of Quinn Ewers we got. But I think about it from a backup standpoint. Well, redshirt freshman Arch Manning, with what was around him, was probably good enough to win you a national championship if he had to play. I don't know that we can say that. As a matter of fact, I don't feel comfortable saying that about Trey Owens or KJ Lacey right now. So that muddied the waters for me a little bit. So I'll give this one to you. I'll let you start with quarterback and which one of the 3 you're taking.
Yeah, I'll go with 25. Again, I like Arch Manning because of his ability to stretch the field vertically, but also extend plays with his legs, right? That's something Texas hasn't utilized under Sarkisian or really had the opportunity to utilize with Quinn Ewers, right? It wasn't part of his game. So I think you might see yourself maybe teetering towards some, turnover-worthy plays, throwing the ball down the field. We saw that with Arch at times, but you're going to see the flashiness, you're going to see the explosive plays, and you're going to see that dynamic running ability that hasn't been, a prominent figure in this offense before. So I'm excited for that. And I would have gone 23 Quinn over 24 as well. I think he took a step back his final year. Obviously, injuries played a big role in that. But look, that history, that rapport that he had with Xavier Worthy, I think he missed that a little bit a year ago as well.
Yeah, I look at the room as a whole. I think if we were looking at it from that standpoint, I would take 23 over 24, 25 because, like I said, I think that was the best version of Quinn. I don't think Malik Murphy played great. He wasn't lights out in the 2 games he had to play, but he was good enough to get you through the 2 games Quinn was hurt.
Top 25 win.
Exactly. And then if Arch Manning is your 3, you're in a pretty good spot with your quarterback room. So to me, it's between that and 2025. And call me prisoner of the moment, but I'm with you. I as I thought about it, the upside of Arch Manning in 2025 and where he can go. And it's kind of a little bit of recency bias, for lack of a better term, because we know what the ceiling for Quinn ultimately was, at least what we got. We don't know where the ceiling for Arch is, and I think it's got a chance to be significantly higher. So round 1, quarterbacks, I'm giving it to 2025 and what we think we're going to get from
That's the whole thing. It's the expectation, right? It's the unknown that's still so attractive. We could look back at this in, 10 months and say, wow, that was a pretty foolish take, but look, we know what we know about Arch, and we're hearing what we hear behind the scenes in spring ball. Everything's leading to this direction, and so far, I'm with you, Jeff. I'm not straying from the idea that Arch is going to be really darn good next fall.
Freezing Cold Tex is going to have this teed up just in case, but I think we're gonna be on the right side of history. At least I hope we are by going with Arch Manning. Okay, so round 1 goes to 2025. Round 2, offensive skill. It's hard to argue with the draft picks and just the pure talent up and down the depth chart on 23. 25, to me, CJ, there aren't enough proven commodities on this roster. As crazy as this sounds, I'm going to go with 2024.
Ooh.
Because I think 2024 Gunnar Helm is a more well-rounded tight end than 2023 Jatavian Sanders. I like the explosive playmaking you get from Jaden Blue to go with Trey Wisner. And to me, a healthy Isaiah Bond was a complete game changer for the 24 offense. We just didn't see it enough. So to me, it's between 23 and 24. I don't know where you're going, but I'm going to go with 2024.
Yeah, I like it. I was actually going to go with 23. Again, I see Adonai Mitchell. I see Xavier Worthy. And then you add in a Jordan Whittington, another draft pick, and Jatavian Sanders, who I know Helm statistically had the better season, all time for a Texas tight end. But, hey, JT Sanders is pretty darn good running up the slot. Texas schemed him open very well. You look at some of those big plays, especially on the road at Alabama. Big-time player there out of the backfield. I'll take my chances with a healthy Jonathan Brooks. But that's a tough battle when you go 23 and 24 at the playmaker position. Speed, again, I don't think there's too much of a difference between the two to say one significantly faster. But I'll take Xavier Worthy on my team any chance I get. So I'll rock with 23. And again, with 25, it's just unknown, right? Waiting to hear more. Not to say that this group can't be really darn good, but right now you just don't know.
If we've got to pick a winner, again, I would go 24 over 23 still if I had to do it over. But if we got to pick a winner, I'm going to go 23 for this. If I can use the caveat that a healthy Isaiah Bond was a game changer for the 2024 offense, I've said it before, I'll say it again, and I don't think I'm going out on a limb here. With a healthy Jonathan Brooks, Texas wins a national championship in 2023. If Jonathan Brooks doesn't get hurt in Fort Worth, Texas is your 2023 national champion. I really believe that.
Yeah, I won't disagree with that. Again, look at 2 fumbles in that game against Washington. That's the biggest point for me.
And beyond that, CJ, I think if you look at the way Sark trusts players, the way he trusts his guys on offense, he didn't trust, at least at that point, trust Jaden Blue and CJ Baxter the way he would have trusted Jonathan Brooks.
Right.
Because when Quinn went down, that was when because Sark was forced to trust Jonathan Brooks a little bit more because you needed to insulate Malik Murphy. When he was forced to trust Jonathan Brooks, that's when we really saw Brooks start to take off. And then he got hurt. So I think especially, and who's to say Washington might have game planned Texas differently, but they were willing to give up the run in that Sugar Bowl. Jonathan Brooks could have run for 150 yards in that game. I mean, with the way Washington was just letting Texas run the football. So I know we're doing revisionist history. We're going back and playing armchair quarterback, but if we've got to pick a winner, I'll give it to 2023. Let's go to line of scrimmage. So you've got the offensive line, and really we'll say the run defense to make up for what we're going to talk about when we talk about pass defense. I guess it really depends on, do you like the tandem of Tavondre Sweat and Byron Murphy, or do you like the platoon of that 2024 defense? To me, CJ, again, I think when you talk about a run defense, when you talk about line of scrimmage play, the 2025 offensive line and the pieces they're going to use to stop the run, you can make an argument that they're just as talented, if not more, than either of the first 2 previous groups. But similar to the previous 2 arguments we've had, the proven commodity aspect, that's what's keeping me from going more all in on 25.
Yeah.
So I went first last time. I'll let you go. You taking 23 or 24 for a line of scrimmage team?
Line of scrimmage, I'm looking at 23. I'm taking the 23 defensive line without any hesitation. Yeah. Now, offensive line, maybe I go with 24. In the sense that I'm looking at a Cam Williams and a Kelvin Banks, older guys. on that offensive line in the middle as well. Look, I like that offensive line. I know that they had their issues when it came to short yardages, creating run lanes at times, but you're looking at a group of guys who play a lot of football. They're, for the most part, weren't many blown assignments in pass protection, right? There was great communication along the line, but that 23 defensive line, Jeff, and I'm going to rock with them. I'm going to go with 23 for this one. If I have a defensive line of Byron Murphy and Tavondre Sweat with a Vernon Broughton and Alfred Collins rotating in with that, sign me up for that 10 times out of 10.
Here's why I'm going to go 2024. And it's splitting hairs is really what we're doing. I can't let go of the goal line stand by Oklahoma in the loss at Red River. I just can't. When you had 4 shots at point blank range and you couldn't. Now, I'll say this. That offensive line got better. You put that chip on their shoulder after that game. They took that personally, and they were a much better offensive line the rest of the year. But I don't know. And you could say the same thing. Okay, Jeff, well, if you're going to say that, what about the Ohio State game in 2024? Fair argument. I get it. But I like the 2024 team better because of the week in, week out competition playing in the SEC. The fact that they had to face Georgia twice and play Ohio State. And I didn't like the fact that the run game, CJ, was so feast or famine. But man, when it was feast in 2024, everybody ate, and they ate well. Like, you think about that Clemson game, like in Dabo's time at Clemson, especially since he started rattling off national championships and going to CFPs, you haven't seen Clemson pushed around like that very often. Now, I know this wasn't like the greatest Clemson defense we've ever seen, but push come to shove, if we're splitting hairs, I think that because of the schedule they played, the caliber of opponents, and the fact that offensive line was a little bit older, which Outland Trophy winner do you prefer?
Yeah.
I'm going to go with 24, and the ultimate trump card is going to be that defense was a really good defense against the run. It won their line of scrimmage battles in the ultimate line of scrimmage league in college football.
Look, I won't disagree, but that feast or famine is the exact reason why I'm going the opposite way, right? The 30 yards rushing against Georgia, you had 40 against Arizona State in the college football playoff. You look at the losses Texas had, what do they average? About 33 rushing yards per game. I don't know if that's accurate, but it was in that range, right around 37 yards, I believe. So that, to me, you take out an entire, aspect of the Texas offense because you couldn't run the ball. Take me back to 2023. And again, maybe that could be the running game. That could be the running backs itself. But when it was that consistent and it was that much of an issue consistently in those losses, I don't know. Tough to side with 24 for me.
And this is the 24 victory for me giving the check mark to 24. I think it also goes for my undying love for the year Trey Wisner had, because I think you got to give a lot of credit to your offensive line. Jonathan Brooks goes on to the NFL. You lose CJ Baxter to a knee injury in the preseason. You're wondering what the heck are you going to do to run the football, and you still end up having a 1,000-yard rusher. And look, I know I talked the bad about the Oklahoma game. Let's talk about the good. That, especially with the way it wasn't Quinn's best night in College Station, but the offensive line and Trey Wisner won you that football game. They dominated the line of scrimmage in a game where you need to bloody your opponent, where you need to punch them in the mouth and win a football game. And they just bludgeoned. As we're seeing, like, the body of work and the numbers will tell you that wasn't an elite A&M defensive line. But now you start looking at the pieces to what the guys are going to have drafted, and you're like, no, from a talent perspective, that was one of the better defensive fronts you faced all year. And Texas won that battle in a landslide.
Yeah. Hey, look, I won't disagree there. And again, you can point to those goal line stands all over the place. I'll say, hey, I'll sign up for that any season if that's what your defense is going to give you. But I think you had that in 23 as well. You look at that Kansas State game in overtime. Who was it running up the middle? Byron Murphy stopping the fourth down there. So I'm with you. And again, Trey Wisner in that game against Texas A&M, that might have sold me, Jeff. You might have convinced me with that alone. But I'm sticking with my guns. 23 is my call for the trenches there.
Can I make one more argument to try to convince you? Okay. If we're talking about goal line stands, maybe the best goal line stand, the two best goal line stands I've seen were by the 2024 Texas defense. Ethan Burke against A&M and Bill Norton against Clemson. Did I convince you at all? Those goal line stands were nice, CJ. They're going to be played they're going to be played in video montages talking about the good things in this program until we're dead and gone. So, well after that. That push you, it nudge you a little closer?
It's close. I look back at 23. You had 8 100-yard rushers in a single game, and 9 and 10 ended up with 99 and 98. So if you're giving me 100 yards on the ground by a single guy, I know that you're at least having some sort of running game there, not running for 30 yards against Arizona State. Rest my case.
All right. I guess I'll yield to you this time. We'll give line of scrimmage to 2023, but I think it's closer than some might think.
Yeah, 100%. That's a tough battle.
Now, where I think this is actually a battle between 2024 and 2025 is going to be the pass defense, because we're going to combine the pass rush with your play in the secondary. I know you just had the Jim Thorpe Award winner who's about to go in the first round of the draft. And Andrew Makuba was a godsend getting him out of the portal, completely changed the complexion of your secondary for the better. But I think your pass rush in 2025 is going to be so good, it'll cushion the blow of the losses on the back end. And I think your turnover numbers, while you might not be one of the top 2 or 3 defenses in the country in interceptions again, because a lot of that has to do with luck, I think you're still going to be a really good third down defense, overall a really good defense against the pass, because your pass rush is going to be so elite. And we've talked about it here on the channel, CJ. PK doesn't have to manufacture a pass rush with the blitz. It's organic because you've got so many pieces. This is the best possible problem to have. It's, okay, I've got all these pieces that can get after the quarterback. How do I maximize them? How do I get the most out of them? So if we're talking about pass defense, and I think, can we both agree, like, we're taking 2023 out?
I was going to throw them completely aside, not even mention them.
And it's nothing against the 23 defense overall. It's just Michael Penix just is that game. Just, I'm pushing that to the side. The pass defense got much better last year, and as good as the pass defense was, you can argue Texas had the best pass defense in the country last year. You can make an argument.
I think Rod has the numbers. Texas went from outside the top 100 pass defense in 23 to top 5 pass defense. I mean, the turnaround was tremendous. And look, I'm going to go with 2024. You had the Thorpe winner. You had 2 guys in your secondary with 5 picks apiece. Both of those guys are moving on. Now, I do think that safety room is really talented. You got maybe an unknown at the opposite corner spot of Manny Muhammad. Is that going to be a Jalen Gilbo? Can he replicate what Jahdae Barron put on tape last year? Look, that's tough to do. Let's be honest, right? Jahdae was the Thorpe. He was the best defensive back in the country. But Jeff, you start talking about some of those defensive ends, you start talking about that pass rush, and it's hard not to be more excited about that individual piece of the Texas 2025 roster than anything, right? You could talk about Arch Manning. You could talk about some of these young wide receivers. I'm looking at that pass rush saying that's going to be the ultimate strength of this team come next fall. But still, I can't part ways with that secondary. And look, Colin Simmons, pretty darn good. Anthony Hill, pretty darn good. Trey Moore, second half of the season, pretty darn good. It's not like they were lacking on the pass rush itself in 24. So that's why I'm going to rock with them. And again, I'm not to say that 25 isn't going to be good as well, but it's still, you're losing the best cornerback. You're losing a day 2 safety. And look, Barron Sorrell, pretty good as well. So
yeah, that's the guy that, to me, if you want to put it over the top and give the edge to 2024, it's Barron Sorrell. There's no, like, did Barron Sorrell have, elite sack numbers? No, but man, in the SEC, I don't care what league or what level you're playing at. When you've got a guy at a premium position like edge, and you can just put him out there for 16 games and not worry about it, like, yeah, we're good. Like, he's going to do his job. We trust him. He's going to make some plays. He's just going to be a rock solid dude for us. That's a bigger loss, CJ, than I think people might realize. As talented as this edge room is, and it may be the most talented edge room in college football, that's a lot to overcome. A guy that you just, hey, we just don't just stick him there and just, we're good for 16 games. Like I said, you not having to worry about a premium position. It's a pretty good comfort to have, something that I think was overlooked with this team.
Yeah, with Barron specifically, again, it was the ability to rush the quarterback and then defend the run. You never had to worry about him specifically off that side. Now, does Texas upgrade in the pass rush game? Perhaps, right? Again, I do think Texas is going to be pretty good. There's length, there's size, there's speed. And anytime you have someone on the other side like a Colin Simmons, it's going to make that opposite edge rusher all the more better because they won't be seeing a tight end there. He's going to be over by Colin Simmons, right? So it's going to be interesting. And moving Trey Moore back to linebacker, seeing him in that second level, how does that unleash more in his game? Because, again, you look at that second half of the year for him last year and then say, let's push him back a level. Okay. Let's see what Texas has drawn up for him specifically. But I'm still rocking with that 24 group. I think that's a really nice tandem when you put the two together.
The same argument I can make for taking 2025 quarterback is the same argument I'm going to make for taking 2025 pass defense. Colin Simmons being a year older,
yep.
The upside. I mean, if we're talking about a guy that I think you agree with me, the upside is he's a top half, dare I say top quarter of the first round type draft pick.
Mm-hmm.
A guy that can go in the top 10, a guy that can go in the top 5, a guy that can maybe, depending on how his career goes, I think he's got this thing to where he's saying, hey, is this a guy that whenever he declares, is he in the discussion to be number 1 overall?
It could be.
I think Colin Simmons has that type of ceiling. And when you've got that type of presence at edge, it completely changes your defense. Like you said, I mean, what are you going to do? Are you going to double team him? Okay, great. Then you're going to single block everybody else up front. Yeah. I don't think I'm out of line saying I think Texas in 2025 has, you can make the argument, and I'll make it because I believe it's true. I think they've got the 2 best front 7 defenders in the country with Colin Simmons and Anthony Hill.
You won't hear disagreements here, and I'm right there with you. It's for sure the best tandem, right? You put the two together. I don't know if there's a team in the country. You look at Ohio State and what they lost. You look at Georgia and what they lost. Having those guys return in your front 7 at key positions, it's going to be big for Texas next fall. And again, if there's any stock remaining, if you have any stock remaining in Colin Simmons, I'll buy it. I want it all.
But I'm going to go with you just because we haven't given 2024 the edge on anything yet. And I feel like we owe it to that team because that defense there, you will not get any arguments from me. And I hope not from any Texas fans watching this. That 2024 defense was a national championship worthy defense. That defense was good enough, more than good enough to win you a national championship. And you knocked on the door thanks to that defense. And like you said, I think the Jim Thorpe Award going to Jahdae Barron, I think that's the trump card. But to me, that's an award for the whole defense. Jahdae had a great year. Don't get me wrong, but there was an individual on that defense. That defense was too good. Somebody needed to be individually recognized. And again, some of the arguments we talked about on offense, CJ, it's the unproven commodity aspect at defensive tackle. Yeah. We've seen Travis Shaw do it in spurts at North Carolina. Cole Brevard was a rock solid, rock steady guy in the Big Ten, but they haven't done it at Texas. And Alex January, while I love some of the stuff he showed, especially in that Cotton Bowl against Ohio State, we haven't seen him do it through a whole season. Yeah. And what are you going to do? What are you going to get out of the young guys? So still a lot of unknowns at defensive tackle. So we'll check. We'll go on the tail of the tape. We'll go 2024 pass defense. An area where we're probably not going to go 2024 special teams. This is between 2023 and 2025. So CJ, I think it comes down to, are you going to take the 2023 because I think it could be a push between what Texas got from Ryan Sanborn in 23 and what you think you're going to get from Jack Bomeister in 25. Even though we heard, things I don't think is maybe crisp or clean as maybe the staff would like to see from Jack Bomeister this spring, but he's a proven commodity. I think it's a push at the end of the day. Do you go with 2023 Bert Auburn, or do you think he's got a bounce back year and we'll get the best version of Bert Auburn? Or maybe we get a version of Will Stone that's better than any version of Bert Auburn we've gotten so far.
First and foremost, right, we're taking that 2024 special teams unit, and just like the 23 secondary, we're just throwing it away.
They're done.
Not even going to look at it.
Yep.
So I'm with you. 23, 25. Where does it come down to? I'm going to lean with 23. And again, it's not just because of the kicking aspect, but the return game, right? I knew Xavier Worthy, when the ball touched his hands, had a chance to house just about any punt. Who's going to be that guy for Texas in 25? Do they have him on roster right now? Who's going to be the kick returner? Because again, Texas had some solid weapons in 2023, whether it be a Savion Red, whether it be a Jaden Blue. You know, some of those guys that they filled in that back end on kickoff return. I don't know right now. I could theorize, right? We saw Ryan Wingo catch punts. We saw Dalen McCutcheon catch punts. Aaron Butler was catching punts. But is that going to be as pertinent a weapon as an Xavier Worthy? I'm going to say no. So I'm rolling with 23. And again, the kicking game, we were saying after 2023, hey, man, it's crazy. Bert Auburn wasn't in the conversation for the Lou Groza.
Yeah.
Times have changed since then, but that's how it was after the 23 season.
And if you need another argument for 2023, which, by the way, I'm not going to play devil's advocate here. I'm giving it to 23. Yeah. It's not so much the kicking battle, which I think is going to be a good battle. And I hope it – I think at the end of the day, one of these guys is going to portal out just because you're going to have a kicker in their last year of eligibility. And I don't think, in other words, I don't think Will Stone's going to hang around to be the kickoff guy. He deserves a chance to go be a kicker for a power conference team. Nor do I think Bert Auburn should hang around and say, well, maybe, things don't go well with Will Stone. If he wants to, he should portal out and go get him an opportunity. So hopefully that kicking competition brings out the best in both of those guys, but not just Xavier Worthy as a punt returner, CJ. Keelan Robinson, there's an unsavory gap of just mediocre to bad kick return game between like DJ Monroe and Fozzie Whitaker in the early 2010s, and then Keelan Robinson. Keelan Robinson with that touchdown. I don't know if for Texas fans, and look, there were so many great moments in 2023, but I think one of the most satisfying moments, you did have a big halftime lead on Tech.
Yeah.
And even if the Red Raiders, if Joey McGuire had galvanized his guys and they were ready for the second half and ready to make this big comeback, for Keelan Robinson to step on their throat with a second half kickoff and take it back for a touchdown, that is the ultimate. No, you don't have a chance to win this game, and we're going to break your will literally at the opening kickoff of the second half. I think for Texas fans, that was probably one of those really cool moments when they realized how special that team was. So yeah, I'll give it to 23 because you were elite. You had elite kicking and punting, and you had elite coverage units. Let's not forget Keelan Robinson and Keaton Crawford as your gunners on punt coverage. You had elite coverage. You had elite return. Again, you had an elite special teams in 2023. I just don't know. Like I said, the unknowns with the return game. I think 25, it should be better than it was last year. I think there's a question. Like it
needs to be.
That's for sure. I mean, and look, I'm giving Jeff Banks a mulligan for last year because in 21, 22, and 23, special teams was the most consistent aspect of this program, Sark's first 3 years. And you have to give a lot of that to Jeff Banks. So I'll give him a mulligan for 1 year that was subpar by anybody's standard. I think you've got enough talent on this roster for your coverage units and your blocking units on returns to be good. Can you find the right return guys? And can one of those kickers at least be reliable from 40 yards and in?
That's what you need. Just reliability at the kicking spot, not something that you throw out there and say, good God, I hope we don't doink this one, right? Because that's kind of where you were at the end of the year.
It should be, CJ, when you cross the 35, you have to feel like we've at least got 3 points.
Points are on the board. Yep.
If we don't turn the ball over, we're going to get points on this drive.
I agree.
So hopefully Texas at least gets back to that. So we'll give the edge to 2023. Here's the interesting one. Coaching. Which version of this staff is better, the 2023 version, 24, or 25? I'm going to say 25 because I think it's the evolution of Sark. I like the changes that PK has made, and I think we maybe underestimate the Johnny Nansen, Dwayne Aquina dynamic and how that can work. It was so good for Arizona a couple of years ago. I think it could be great for Texas. We just talked about Jeff Banks having a bounce back year. I think, and you look at the special assistants, what Neil Brown can help do to change some of the things that need to be changed on offense. I think the version of this, the 2025 version of the Steve Sarkisian staff, I think has a chance to be the best we've seen in his tenure.
Look, I love that take. You might have sold me on 25 being the pick for this as well. Oddly enough, I'm going to put 24 last. I wasn't
Fair,
thrilled.
yeah.
I wasn't thrilled with 24. Of course, you could point to special teams as a point, a selling point. I'm not in this argument, but I look at the Arizona State game, the interception Quinn threw with 7 minutes left when you should have been eating clock. I look at Ohio State, some of those second down call on the 1 yard line. Is that all coaching? Yeah, it's play calling, right? So there are plenty of arguments for me that just don't add up when it comes to 2024 being the spot. So I'll look right ahead with you for 2025 saying, okay, you've learned, right? Red zone was an issue. It has been an issue, but third downs you figured out from 23 to 24. What now can you add to your bag if you're Steve Sarkisian, who, again, we've kind of talked about it. Texas started off tremendous in the red zone early in 24, and it just tapered off, right? For whatever reason, they just lost the magic sauce, and it bit Texas for the second year in a row. So what can Texas do to get over that? Hopefully some of those special assistants are what get you over the hump.
Yeah, I just think from a game management standpoint, I'm not saying Sark was bad in 2023 because of all the games he's coached, CJ, and won at Texas, I think the Alabama game in Tuscaloosa was probably that's peak Sark from what we've seen, just in terms of how prepared he had his guys, how he managed the game. He made all the right decisions. You can make the argument that Steve Sarkisian outcoached Nick Saban that night. Yeah. You can make that. That might sound crazy to some people, but go back and watch that game. Sark pushed all the right buttons on that night. If there was any times where Texas stumbled, it was because, of ball security or something. I think things that didn't have a lot to do with Sark per se. Things were just a little too herky-jerky for me in 24 with some of the decisions we saw made. But I think now, after being to the semifinals 2 years in a row, I think Sark has finally figured out, all right, and I'll give 25 the edge because of this. And Rod and I talked about this on Football Theory. But I think when you go back and listen to Sark, when we talked to him before spring practice, and he talked about, hey, needing to make sure he's got enough stuff to get through a 16, 17 game season, I think we're just going to see Sark hopefully go back in the lab and come out with his best call sheets, the best stuff he's had in game. If we get the best version of Sark, then and the best version of this staff, then all the unknown commodities that we're talking about with 2025, the development should be there. And by the time you get to that A&M game at the end of the regular season, this should be a team that nobody wants to see in the playoff.
I completely agree. And again, it's that evolution, right? Sark also kind of mentioned, he said, I don't know if we had the creativity, right? If I had to play calls for this late in the season, and that might sound weird, right? If it works, it works. Throw it out there again, right? But for these play callers to have something new, to push the envelope when it comes to looks, formations, all sorts of play calls that haven't been seen before. It's one of those weird deals where you don't want to go back to the well, and Sark normally doesn't, right? So does he add more? And that's to your point, 2025, you're now planning to play 16 games. You probably weren't a year ago, or at least if you were, you didn't know that it took that much
to
get to that level. So I'm with you. 25 is going to be the answer for me. And for Texas fans, I think we all hope that was going to be the case.
So we're going special teams, line of scrimmage, and offensive skill are all going to 2023.
Yep.
Pass defense to 2024. But I'll give a tip of the cap to our guy, Rod Babers. You're on the winning drive with Rod twice a week. I'm on Football Theory with Rod on Thursdays here on the channel. I always go back to what Rod says he tells makes the difference in a big game. Do you trust the coach and do you trust the quarterback?
Mm-hmm.
And if we're saying of these three Texas teams, if we like 2025 Arch Manning better than what Texas had in 23 and 24, and the 2025 version of Sark and his staff is going to be the best staff. This is a team that with all the unknown variables and the unproven commodities, this is a team that should start to trend upward at some point and be a team that's right there in the mix to get to Atlanta to win an SEC championship and get back to the playoff.
I'm right there with you. Again, that's the standard for Texas, right? You've been right there 2 years in a row. How can you surpass it? How can you overcome? Quarterback and coaching can get you there. So we'll see, because there's plenty of talent elsewhere.
Exactly. All right. So I don't know that we settled anything, CJ, but I think it just shows that, hey, if you're worried about Texas taking a step back, don't be, because maybe the two most important things in football, we're giving the 2025 team the edge, which means you've got a chance. You've got a chance to be special and go compete for a championship.
100%.
All right, that's going to do it for this fun exercise, looking at Texas football and doing some comparisons. Everybody thanks CJ for bringing this topic up. This was his branch out. And CJ, this was fun, man. I had a lot of fun doing this.
Yeah, no, I hope I hope you all agree with us. But I know that there's going to be a fun conversation regardless.
And if not, that's what makes these things fun. All right, for CJ Vogel, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you for tuning in. And until next time, hook 'em.